by his mercy. And then he said something very astounding, for which was one of the main reasons that, it was a mystical thing, but it was one of the reasons that broke through my hippie anarthas or whatever I had, so that I joined. Srila Prabhupada said, "You cannot make the sun rise." These are in my own words. It's in the folio much more eloquently. And similarly, you cannot make God appear before you just to answer your doubts. So what had happened was 6 months before, I had been sitting on the edge of a cliff after climbing a mountain all night long. And I was going to meditate on Om, and then when the sun rose, I was going to merge with the sun. I was going to become one with the one at that time. And Srila Prabhupada said, "You cannot," and when the sun rose, after all this endeavor, I'd been fasting for days, and I'm sitting out here, I climbed all night long this mountain. When the sun rose, it was a cloudy day, and I couldn't even see the sun. So Srila Prabhupada says, "You cannot make the sun rise," and similarly, you cannot make God appear before you just to answer your doubts. And the night before I had come to Krishna consciousness, I had prayed to Krishna, to a deity of Lord Shiva, to please help me to know what was the answer of, for everything. And then here the next day I meet Srila Prabhupada. It was so wonderful how everything happened. And then Srila Prabhupada gave a lecture and so on and so forth. Then he went back to his apartment, and we were all ready for bed. And then the word got out, Srila Prabhupada came back. This is like 30 minutes later or so. So we all scrambled together and came into the temple room, and we were sitting there very expectantly, and Srila Prabhupada was very grave. And he said, he began by, he didn't say anything at first. He played a tape of Vande Hum with himself on the harmonium. He said, "I've just received one telegram from my godbrothers that Keshav Maharaj, the person who gave me sannyas, has departed." And he said, then as he was talking, he began remembering his spiritual master. There's a cassette tape of this. And as he was speaking, there was one tear, very, very slowly came and just kind of like hovered for a little while. It was like his separation from his spiritual master. It was such a beautiful tear, just like a shining diamond. So many of us saw that and have commented on it. And at last it fell. It was so beautiful. So Srila Prabhupada, he asked that one document be sent around the room. And this one girl, Madhavilata, was asked to take it around. So she's taking around this document to sign, to reply to the Gaudiya Math that he's received the news. And then Srila Prabhupada said, the girl, she was hesitating, like there was another guest tonight, and she wasn't going to let us sign. And Srila Prabhupada said, no, everyone here, they are all witness. So then I knew that Srila Prabhupada was accepting me in a certain way. He was accepting me as a part of something that was happening there, and it was a very wonderful experience. After being with Srila Prabhupada in his room for 2 hours, and there were so many things that happened, then I went into tears. And I said, okay, I'm leaving ISKCON. I'm leaving this movement. I can't take it anymore. I can't become pure like that. I can't become a pure devotee. And so the Narayana and Jai Gopal, they said, "You're right. This is not an ascending process. You can't do it. But Srila Prabhupada is so great that he can make a devotee even out of you." And that one glorification of Srila Prabhupada, thank you Narayan, has kept me all these years. So one night, Srila Prabhupada called for us to come and visit him in his quarters at 26 2nd Avenue. In other words, Srila Prabhupada's apartment, where he's staying, is at 26 2nd Avenue. But the new temple is a block or two down the street at 61 2nd Avenue. So we all knew the history and the privilege of seeing Srila Prabhupada at 26 Second Avenue, so it was really wonderful. So Rukmini and Saradiya and I, we were on our way, but Saradiya at the last minute decided she didn't want to come. There was some practical thing with her laundry or something like that. So Rukmini and I, the minute that we walk in through the door, Srila Prabhupada said, "Where is Saradiya?" And the second we just come in the door, he says, "Where is Saradiya?" And then we understood that Srila Prabhupada was very concerned for each of his daughters, where they were, how they were being engaged, how they were feeling, because there were some feelings there also for why she had stayed back. Srila Prabhupada said, I had no reason to leave Vrindavan to come here. And we all were wondering why Srila Prabhupada had said that. It was almost as though there was a change, that something was going on, and we had displeased him or something. It was such a heavy thing for him to say. And then he said, "And you have no reason to come here to see me, except Krishna." And it was so beautiful, the way that smile came up, and he said that. He said, and then he looked at all of our eyes, and he went right around the room. He said, "I want that each of you open a center." And he said, this Krishna consciousness must go all over the world. So later in that darshan, then, Rukmini asked, "Well, does that mean women too?" And Srila Prabhupada said, "Yes." And then he mentioned the person that I was named after, Jahnava Mata. And he said that she had been a great preacher in Krishna consciousness. Gargamuni's introduced to Srila Prabhupada. We have just begun spiritual sky incense. So then Srila Prabhupada said, "So, Birbhadra," he's this little 12-year-old servant, like this. "Birbhadra, you should work," or maybe it was Garish, it was one of the two boys. He said, "You should work for Gargamuni. And Gargamuni, you should pay something to Birbhadra." And so we're all astounded. Here's a little boy that's going to be getting money. And the little boy, he's like beaming, "I'm going to have money," like even if it's $5 is more than any brahmachari had at that time, So Srila Prabhupada reiterates it again. He says, "So you will work for Gargamuni, and Gargamuni, you will pay something to Birbhadra." So it just deepens it, and then Srila Prabhupada said it again, and he said, "And Birbhadra, you give the money to me." And then the look on his face, Birbhadra's face, we're all laughing. So I wanted to be a part of that kind of atmosphere. Everything's light and joyful and intimate, and I wanted to be part of that. So I asked Srila Prabhupada, "Swamiji, when I chant Hare Krishna, can I pray for all living entities?" And Srila Prabhupada answered me, You know all living entities? You know all living entities? No, you pray to Krishna, and you let Krishna take care of all living entities." Bharadraj and I were called to Srila Prabhupada's room, Srila Prabhupada, we were going to talk to Srila Prabhupada about painting for the Krishna book. So I came in, and Bharadraj was already speaking to Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada turns to me the minute that I come in and said, "So," in the middle of the conversation, "So, what was the conclusion of Einstein at the end of his life?" And this is the most amazing thing, because I'm not a scholar, and I don't know anything. But I knew the answer to that question. And so I said that there is a higher consciousness. That because of the order of the universe, this implies a higher being. So Srila Prabhupada said, "Yes," and then he turned back and continued speaking to Bharadraj. And this is exactly like what happened to Brahma Tirtha, in which Srila Prabhupada asked him the meaning of this verse that he had just quoted in Sanskrit or something like that. And what is the translation or something like that? And Brahmatirtha, from his college days, out of the 700 verses of the Bhagavad Gita, that was the only one that he had memorized. And so he was able to quote it to Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada does this. And then Srila Prabhupada's talking, and he begins telling Krishna book stories. Now, for us, actually, we'd never heard of these stories before. We're getting them on the tapes. But Srila Prabhupada now, he's going to tell us stories that we've never heard before. And he's saying that Lord Krishna, he was such a naughty boy. Oh, he also said that to me. He said, a naughty boy is an intelligent boy. I was naughty when I was a little boy, and so was Lord Krishna, and so was Lord Chaitanya. And so then he's talking about how naughty Lord Krishna is. He says he used to go and he used to pass urine on the clean floor, and then he'd go on it, and Srila Prabhupada went like that. Of course, in the book it says spit, but Srila Prabhupada went like that. And then Srila Prabhupada begins telling the story about the universal form, the universe being contained within the mouth of Lord Krishna when Mother Yashoda opens his mouth. So Srila Prabhupada begins to describe it, and he begins to describe how there were oceans and seas, and there was air and fire and earth and water and the 10 directions, north, south, east and west, mountains, and Srila Prabhupada goes on like this for about 5 minutes. And Bharadwaj and I were, as he's speaking, and in this wonderful, charismatic way, we're gradually leaning forward, unbeknownst to us, as we're involved in this story like this. And then at one point, Srila Prabhupada said to Bharadwaj, "Now you paint that!" And it was such a shock. It was a double shock, because we hadn't expected Srila Prabhupada. We were coming in, and we weren't expecting Srila Prabhupada to do something sudden like that. And also, it was a shock of how to paint it. So Bharadwaj almost fell over backwards, almost lost his balance. And I also fell completely backwards too, like we were just, physically, we were shocked by what Srila Prabhupada had said. So months later, Bharadwaj was up in Montreal and really struggling with how to paint this picture. So then he writes to Srila Prabhupada and said, Srila Prabhupada, in all due honesty, I cannot figure it out, how to put all those things in Krishna's mouth. So then Srila Prabhupada sent back a little sketch, and it shows a stick figure of Mother Yashoda standing up. It shows a little stick figure of baby Krishna, of little child Krishna sitting down, and it shows a balloon coming out of his mouth. He said, that's how you do it. And then Bharadwaj did this beautiful, beautiful painting that's in the original Krishna book of all these things in Krishna's mouth. And that painting is now hanging in the foyer of the Montreal temple. This incident takes place in Boston at the airport in 1969. And Bhagavan is there, Kirtanananda is there, Brahmananda is there. Everyone has come from all these different centers. And Brahmananda is instructing us, now everybody, you have to behave in a certain way. Previously, you jump over chairs at the airport, it's not good. We have to have some kind of protocol of an etiquette, how we handle ourselves in public. This is PR. So everybody's behaving themselves very nicely. And then after a long wait, we see Srila Prabhupada's bead bag up above the customs, some kind of customs wall. We can see it, Srila Prabhupada's. And when Kirtanananda saw this bead bag going like this, he lost it. With his danda, he goes flying and jumping. And all of us went flying and jumping. I'm sorry, but that's all we could do. And then Srila Prabhupada came out, and he was beaming. And we were all just bowing down as he was coming. And then there was just like a whole sea of us bowing down. First there was a path of us bowing down, and then there was a whole sea of us bowing down. And meanwhile, there are all these newspaper reporters and with their cameras and so on and so forth, and they're looking at all this sea of Americans in 1969 bowing down to this Indian sannyasi. Srila Prabhupada notes it. And he said, so, the spiritual master is to be worshipped as God. Can't hear a pin drop in that part of the airport. But if the spiritual master thinks that he is God, then he is dog. And then he had him. He had him. Pariksit said to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, should we attend classes? Because what was happening at that time was Bhardwaj was taking the artists over to the Los Angeles County Art Museum, and we were studying the art and making sketches and so on and so forth, and he was giving us sketching classes and so on and so forth. Srila Prabhupada said, yes. And Pariksit said, but I mean, and Srila Prabhupada said, yes, morning and evening classes, and Pariksit interrupted him and said, but I mean, and Srila Prabhupada interrupted him and said, but I mean morning and evening classes. And then at that time he said, by your attending these classes, then you will please the Lord from within your heart, and you will receive instructions from within as Paramatma. Then there's another incident. It was in L.A. in 1975, and Srila Prabhupada was making a tour of all of the L.A. community. So he comes to the art department, and we had just whitewashed the walls and everything and tried to make this dumpy-looking place look nice for Srila Prabhupada. And he's sitting down, and the room is packed. I think my husband got in there too. It was, really, you were privileged to be able to be in that room because there was so little room. And somehow or another, I was already in there, so I was lucky. So Srila Prabhupada is making no comment. And there's a picture very prominently displayed by Jairam. But Srila Prabhupada makes no comment. So then Rameshwara says, Srila Prabhupada, Jairam did this beautiful painting of Radha and Krishna. He wants, Srila Prabhupada. That meant a lot to me. I was really contemplating that one. I contemplated that one a lot. Srila Prabhupada knew us so well. And it wasn't very long after that Jairam actually left the movement and started painting for the Scientologists. And the symptoms were already in full swing that he would be leaving us. And Srila Prabhupada just like that. And then Maharaj was saying, Srila Prabhupada, when I go to India with these artists for the Mayapur festival, I also want your permission to take them on a tour of India. And we will be taking sketches in all the holy places to make our paintings much more authentic. Srila Prabhupada said, and as I'm painting today, this is one of my mantras. Srila Prabhupada said, we are not archaeologists. And then he went further and he was explaining how all of this inspiration that we have comes from Paramatma as we advance in devotional service. We are not archaeologists. In Dallas in 1972, Srila Prabhupada, there's a very wonderful and flavorful story about how Sri Sri Radha Kalachandji came to the meeting. So the deities arrived the same day as Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada had instructed that the deities be installed in 2 days. So the deities were covered with a very sticky substance. So there were pieces of like burlap stuck. And even in the painted areas, like his eyes, etc., there were little pieces of burlap and cloth that were getting stuck to it because they were continuing to be sticky. So the head pujari, Ichamari, she was very concerned because she knew that when we would be dressing the deities in the future, that we would have some difficulty. So we tried every solvent that we could think of. There was nothing that would activate this sticky substance to come off. it was something like dupe. It actually would come up, you know. So Ichamati left me in charge of taking this stuff off at the end, when we'd already tried everything. And I'd already brought up the point of paint remover, and we had thought about it a little bit. And finally, she left, and I was still trying different substances. And then I began to use the paint remover, and how it happened, I don't know. I don't know if just in the course of using the paint remover on the large areas, if it came off on the painted area, however it started happening, I don't know. But my great offense was that in the end I decided to just go ahead. It was all right. I could go ahead and take all the paint off of the deities, and I could repaint them in 2 days' time. I had the confidence that I could do this. So I removed all the paint from the deities, and when the head pujari came back, she was in a total state of shock. I said, that's all right, you know. She was in a state of shock. It was irreparable. And I began to understand what I had done, you know, in an unauthorized way. Now, I did not know at this time that these deities were already installed. I thought this was prior to them being installed. I didn't know that they had, in one sense, they had been worshipped and that they were 500-year-old deities. I didn't know any of this history at that time. This does not minimize my offense. But anyway, so then I'm painting all night long in Srila Prabhupada's quarters. I'm painting these deities. And then the next morning, all night long, and then I touched the deity, and the deity was totally wet. It was like I was using all this, what do you call it, Japan dryer, etc., and I was confident. And I could see something is wrong, something is not happening. This is not acting according to plan. The paint is totally wet. So Srila Prabhupada's on his morning walk, and Satsrupa Maharaj, he informs Srila Prabhupada of the situation. And Srila Prabhupada stops, and he says, this is my version of it, the best that I can know. He said, pack my bags immediately. I am leaving this temple. You can do whatever you like with the deities, but just don't consult me. So naturally, I went into a suicidal state, very emotionally crying and devastated by my offense of having acted in an unauthorized way. And so then a meeting was called, and you have the GBC, the head pujari, the temple president, everyone's there. And it's in Srila Prabhupada's room. And Srila Prabhupada says, so who has done this? And everyone says, Jahnava did it. So then Srila Prabhupada turns his glance over to me. And he says, who told you to do this? And at this moment, I was totally choked with emotion. There was no question of speech coming out of my mouth. And at the same time, I remember the Srimad Bhagavatam, where the bull does not blame anyone for his condition. So remembering this section of the Bhagavatam, I could have pointed my finger a few places, but I didn't. And I felt that I should not do this. And then Srila Prabhupada seemed a little, from within, I felt a little that Srila Prabhupada was condoning or approving that I'm not blaming someone else. So then Srila Prabhupada said, why did you do this? And again, I'm so choked with emotion, because I've just been crying for 2 hours in a hysterical state. And so Srila Prabhupada begins to be disgusted with me. And he starts to turn his he starts to turn his glance away from me and his mercy away from me. And I thought, Krishna's kicking and his kissing are the same. I want it. I want whatever Srila Prabhupada has to give me. It's mine. This is my quota. So I choked it off. I said, nonsense, Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada said, why have you done this? Nonsense, Srila Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada said, suicidal nonsense. And then he turns, now he's turning away from me. I've gotten my mercy. And he's turning away and he's saying, no. Then he asks me, he says, so what is to be done about it? And now I'm beginning to feel, he's changed his tone of voice a little bit, and he seems pleased. So I felt a little, well, maybe it's not all that bad, a little let off the hook. So I said, well, I just called Bharadwaj in LA and explained the situation to him, that this paint is not drying, and so on and so forth. And he suggested that I use, so Prabhupada said, Bharadwaj, I am your spiritual master, and I am sitting right in front of you. Why you do not ask me? And I assure you that the sound reverberations of that practically the Shringa form of Srila Prabhupada, his servant of Lord Nrsimhadev, is going out into the universe, still reverberating to this day. It took me about 2 or 3 years to calm down from that. It was so a wonderful cleansing process. And so then Srila Prabhupada is practically disgusted with me. And he turns his glance away from me and he says, so what is to be done about this? So then Ichumati, in all humility, says the same thing I just did, but with humility. She says, well, Srila Prabhupada, actually, there's this kind of enamel paint, and if we use this enamel paint, it can dry within 6 to 8 hours. Would it be all right with you if we use this kind of paint? And Srila Prabhupada said, do it immediately.
One thing that really struck me is one of the first letters Srila Prabhupada ever sent me was when he was in India. And I had that tremendous desire to take care of him when he came back. For those 3 weeks had really changed my life. Spending 3 weeks with him after he got out of the hospital, I really wanted to continue serving him in that way. And so the whole 6 months he was in India, I was praying to Lord Jagannath every day that if he comes back, please let me be his servant, please let me cook for him, please let me clean his room, let me do anything, just let me be near him, let me serve him and be near him. This was my very strong desire. And so I got a letter from him, and in the letter, the last statement was, I know your mind. Just, I know your mind. One thing that I do remember very clearly was, he said this a few times when I brought the plate in, and there would be sabji, rice, dal, chapatis. He would say that this is so amazing to me, because when I was in India, everyone said, oh, Swamiji, don't go to America. In America, there will be no food for you. You'll starve. They eat only meat in America. Because back here, we're talking back in 25, 30 years ago, there wasn't that much interchange between India and America. So they would tell me, don't go there. And so I simply said, what is that? I shall live on bread and potatoes. And so I thought I would live on bread and potatoes, but now I see Krishna has sent everything. Dal, rice, chapatis, all sabji, everything. And he would say this quite like a number of times, how he was so amazed and happy that Krishna had sent everything, just as if he were in India. And but he thought that he was just going to live on bread and potatoes here. The night he had the stroke was a very traumatic experience. Jadharani and I were perched by the window looking in to the room. There was a window between his living room and his bedroom. You know, it was an arch window in New York. And he was very weak. And still he would have the boys, Satsrup or Brahmananda or whoever was there, they would take turns. They would sit him up and open the Bhagavatam, and he would continue teaching and continue reading the story of Prahlad Maharaj. Even though he was, I'm saying he was apparently suffering, or he was apparently at a very critical time hovering between life and death, he didn't care for that. All he cared about was, he only cared about teaching us. And I never saw such selfless love. I was deeply affected at that moment. I realized a lot of things. I saw really pure love. I saw how much he loved us, and I realized that he wouldn't be with us very long. And I made a vow that I would do everything I could to take care of him and help him and do whatever I could to make things easier for him. I know once when we were in New Jersey, a funny thing happened. We used to sit and all eat. He would sit on the sofa and he would eat on a little table in front of the sofa, and we would sit on the floor and we would all eat there. And we'd talk about different things during the meal. And so I remember one time we were talking about brown rice, white rice, long grain rice, this rice, that rice. And I was, and he was saying how his servant, there was one servant that he had that didn't like the long grain fine rice. His taste was for the lesser quality rice because that was his taste, you know. And then we were talking about, he was saying how brown rice is for the animals. And so I said, well, I must be an animal because I really like brown rice. And he just laughed. He just laughed and laughed and laughed because it was such a simple, it was really done in a mood of simplicity, you know, but he really thought that was funny. Oh, well, in the very beginning, in New York, before he got ill, he had us working on a story of Prahlad Maharaj and Hiranyakashipu. And so he was describing to us, he was really keen on having this into a slideshow for children. And this was his vision, which eventually manifested. And so he had us working on this, and he would tell us all about the poses. He would pose. He posed for Hiranyakashipu on one leg, and he used to pose for Lord Nrsingadev, and he loved to pose for Lord Nrsingadev. He would come in at least once a day and do a roar. I mean, he would come in and describe how Lord Nrsingadev, and his eyes would get big, and you could see the white up above coming out of the column. This was his delight. He enjoyed this very much. And once Jadharani had him pose, he wrapped a dhoti, a white dhoti, you know, and then into a threefold bending posture, you know, so that we could see how the pleats fell. So he posed like Krishna. And he was very, you know, he was right there watching us, seeing what we were doing. He would come in and see how we were doing it. And once I had these, there's this picture of Prahlad sitting in the boiling oil. And so I had to, you know, come up with some demons. Like I didn't know what demons were like. So I think I probably dug them out of a Hieronymus Bosch painting, you know, this. Somehow I got these demons in there. And so I asked Prabhupada, you know, after I did them, you know, got them drawn in, were they okay? And he says, oh yes, this is very good. And he says, there are such demons, they're like this. And he is saying, yes, even on this planet, there are such demons. And I said, oh, really? I didn't know that. And he looked at me and he said, there are a lot of things you do not know. I remember Achyutananda was in India at that time, that we were in Montreal. This one just comes to my mind. Achyutananda was in India at that time, and he was there with a young brahmachari named Brishikesh, I think. can't remember what his other name was. Anyway, somehow or other, this boy had gone to the ashram of Ban Maharaj and taken reinitiation from Ban Maharaj. And Prabhupada was extremely upset. I didn't really understand why, but he explained to me, he said, of course this boy is an American boy. This American boy is a fool. He doesn't know anything. It's not his fault. He's just a foolish youth. But Ban Maharaj, he is responsible. He knows that this is, what he is saying by doing this is he is saying that I am not a bona fide spiritual master. So he was extremely upset by this. I actually had never seen him that upset, because it was dealing with a kind of Vaishnava etiquette that I didn't really understand. Parsharani wrote a poem and sent it to Prabhupada, and I, of course, would open his mail and sit there and read his mail to him, and this poem was pretty bizarre. It said, I offer my humble obeisances to my spiritual master, who is, I'm just the gist of it, who's continuously running here and there, playing hide and go seek with Krishna and the cowboys, who is always absorbed in hide and go seek and leapfrog, and describing so many cowherd, so many Leela pastimes. And Prabhupada was sitting there and says, she has become advanced. Publish this poem in Back to Godhead. And it was printed in Back to Godhead. There was no way to get into the Mela because there were 20 million people there. There were no train reservations. You'd have to have your own helicopter. And there were no buses. It's like people were coming in, you know, lying on top of trains and stacked against the walls of trains. And his doctor had said that he couldn't fly, and the devotees didn't want him to go, but he was determined. He was going to go to Kumbh Mela. Everybody told him not to, but at the last minute he made his own decisions. And so miraculously, there was one sweet Indian gentleman named Mr. Gupta who had just joined about 2 months prior. He just happened to be the chief engineer of Indian Railway. And so what he did was he added 2 cars to the trains. This is not done in India. I mean, totally unheard of. But he added a first-class car, and he added a second-class car. And he, not only that, he arranged that Prabhupada's car was freshly painted and there were garlands hanging in it. And he arranged for his personal servant to go with him into the Mela, you know, to drive with him. And we had just given our money, you know, I was traveling with Kusha and her 3-year-old son, and we gave our money to Mr. Gupta. We didn't know, but we had a coupe right next to Prabhupada's. And then while we were on the train, it dawned on me, he told me he was going to take me to the Mela. And here we could, you know, it was the coupe right next, you know, his coupe with his sannyasis and brahmacharis he was traveling with, and then the next coupe. They're like little rooms in Indian trains, where we could hear him talking at the stops. And sometimes we would take grapes or take mangoes or things into them. And of course the train stopped outside the Mela, because the train station during Kumbh Mela is a nightmare. It's just like, you know, they're usually a nightmare anyway, but they're more of a nightmare with thousands of people. And so we stopped outside Allahabad in the dark, and we got off the train, and Hansadutta's buses picked us up. And of course Prabhupada's car was there, and then we drove into the Mela in that way. And then while we were in the Mela, Prabhupada was wanting milk. There was no way to get milk. So I talked to Mr. Gupta, and Mr. Gupta arranged for a cow to be brought to our compound in the Mela so that Prabhupada could have fresh milk. Mr. Gupta was wonderful. He really arranged for everything. And then he arranged for a train to pick Prabhupada when he was ready to leave the Mela. From the Mela, he went to, I can't remember whether he went to Calcutta or Bombay. Anyway, he left the Mela. They picked him up outside this train station. In other words, they made a special stop for the train, 2 cars were put on the train from Bombay, all the way, empty cars all the way, to pick him up and then take him out of the mail. I mean, this is just like, in India this would be considered a miracle, because, I mean, the rolls of bureaucracy just to get a train ticket. If anybody's been to India, they know. But to have 2 whole cars put on just for him, you know, and because there was no other way he could travel, he couldn't fly. In New Jersey, we were sitting in the garden one day, and there was a slug. That's an ugly thing. You know what a slug is? It's an ugly thing without, like a snail without a shell. And it was crawling there right next to him, and I said, ooh, look, you know, I was a kid. And he said, he got this look of tremendous compassion on his face. And he said, chant to the poor creature. And so he had me sitting there chanting to this slug, you know. And now I still chant to slugs, because I remember Prabhupada telling me to chant to the slug, and when I chant to slugs now, or little insects or whatever, I know that this is one of his instructions, that we're given this human form of life, and we can chant, and they can't, but the soul can hear. The tree can hear, the bird can hear, you know, everything. And this is, we would sit outdoors and he would talk like this. I can remember once he was talking about 2 butterflies that were flying together. And he's saying, just see, there's family life also in the butterflies, you know, you know. And we were on the beach in New Jersey, and there are little ants on the beach and stuff, you know. And he was saying, they say there's no life on the moon, but here on the beach we see there's life. There's life in every part of God's creation. It's continuously seeing, constantly viewing the world through vision of Krishna Bhakti. There's never any time that he wasn't. And then he went on to describe the abominable snowman, how the abominable snowman is a big demon, you know, living in the mountains with big footprints, and how there are all these various entities in the deep in the ocean and up in the mountains and in the dark jungles of Africa. There are all kinds of things. You know, when you're fresh out of school, you think the scientists that everything that's there has been discovered, and it's all been taught in History 101 or Anthropology 202 or whatever. But he made it very clear that that's not the way it is, that there's a lot of things that we didn't know about. And of course we accepted that, you know, his view of the world. But it was just very interesting to see the things that he would come up with. In Hawaii once, there was a couple who came to visit him, and this particular devotee was very good at making, he was a sculptor. He had helped me make some deities, and Prabhupada wanted him to make some deities, I think Panchatattva deities. He went on and on to explain to him how he wanted him to do it and so forth, and spent quite a bit of time explaining it all to him. And then after the conversation, the boy asked him if it was okay for his wife to make silk, to kill the silkworms to make the silk. And Prabhupada was like, after they left, he was saying, these Western boys are so creative. Next they will be asking me if they can kill cows to make mridungas. I can remember one of the most persistent memories is the sand crab story. And this took place in Hawaii many years later. But again, we were walking on the beach, and he was talking about the sand crabs. There's these little white crabs that as you walk down the beach, they run and hide in their hole. You know, they run sideways. You've seen them, I'm sure. And he went on and on for days about the sand crabs. And what he was saying, finally it dawned on me that he was saying that there's no such word in the Vedic, in Sanskrit or in the Vedic text as instinct. That instinct, why is the sand crab running? This is the kind of conversation. Why is the sand crab running? The sand crab is running away due to instinct, they would say. His instinct is to go into its hole. But he was saying that there's no such thing as instinct, that instinct is a word that's been coined by the scientists to cover up for the fact that there's supersoul, there's God, and there's past experience. And he went on and on to explain this in detail, and finally it dawned on me that I've been taught Darwinism all my life. And I didn't even know it. Even though I've been a devotee for, at this point, maybe 8 years or whatever, 7 years or something, that Darwinism is what we're taught in the schools. We're raised this way. We were raised to think that everything is operating on instinct. The birds are doing this, the beasts are doing this. But Prabhupada was like blasting this philosophy day after day with this explanation. He went into detail with me. He said, supposing, he asked me, supposing you know where's the privy. The privy is the bathroom. It's just in there. Now, supposing you come into this house 20 years from now. Because you were here 20 years ago, you know the privy is there. Similarly, you've been in the body before, many lifetimes, so you know that as soon as you open the eyes, you look for the mother's breast. The little animal is nudging for the mother's breast. So similarly, it's the past experience, the past lifetimes, and it's the guidance of the supersoul within the heart that guides the living entity. It's not instinct. There's no such thing as instinct. Instinct makes no sense at all. It's a word. What does instinct mean? It means nothing. And if you stop and think about it and you analyze it, you see it means absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And yet the scientists have convinced everyone that the whole of nature is moving by instinct. But the whole of nature is not moving by instinct, it's moving by supersoul. You can throw food outside and within 20 minutes the birds will be eating it. And they'll say it's instinct. But it's actually the supersoul is guiding them, oh, there's food. You know? And so this is the kind of talks that he would get into. When we were living in Los Angeles, when he would take his nap, I would usually sit and read Chaitanya Charitamrita. We had a copy that was translated by some scholar that Govinda had gotten. It was like 7 little volumes. And we would sit and, I would sit and read it, or Krishna would also read it too, and while he would take his nap. And so he would come in and he would say, oh, what are you reading? And we would say, this is Chaitanya Charitamrita. And, you know, he saw that we were really interested in this book, Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so he decided that he would translate it also and make a good translation. And so he engaged Govinda in the transliteration work. And I started typing the, transcribing the tapes for Chaitanya Charitamrita, because he wanted to give us that, you know, since there was he could see we were very eager to read it. One thing I was thinking, he was sitting on the rooftop of the Honolulu temple once and getting a massage, I think by Srila Kirti. And the rooftop of the Honolulu temple faces the back of Nuuanu Valley, which is very beautiful. It usually has a rain cloud about the color of Krishna, and it usually has a rainbow, 1 or 2 rainbows. It's a very beautiful, beautiful area. And so that day there was a rainbow, and he became very poetic, and he started talking about how the rainbow has the 3 colors of the material nature, the red for the passion, and the yellow for the sattva gun, and the blue for the tamagun, and how all the modes of nature are coming from these 3 colors, just like on the artist's palette, red, yellow, and blue are the primary colors, and all the other colors are made from those. He was saying how these 3 colors in the rainbow, these 3 colors of those 3 gunas, all the various mixtures of gunas the living entities are in, are coming from those 3. It was very poetic and very beautiful. I have one photograph at home of Prabhupada sitting and holding a globe and turning the globe around. It's a color photo, and he's saying, Brahmananda will go here, Gargamuni will go here, describing, he's just turning the globe and at all the countries. And here we are, a handful of teenagers, mind you, who can't even get it together, don't even know how to brush their teeth or whatever. And he's got it all in his mind with this globe that he's going to send us all over the world and open centers all over the world. And he was extremely interested in Russia. He always talked about Russia. And he always wanted that Russia should receive the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. Jehovah's Witnesses came to visit once in Los Angeles. And so Prabhupada said, let them in. So I let them in. And they sat and they talked with him in his room. And they were preaching, their philosophy. And apparently they believe that within this body, I don't really know their philosophy that well, but within this body you will become liberated, and this body is eternal. And Prabhupada kept asking them, with this body? With this body? Like he was just incredulous that they could actually believe that this body was eternal. And so, but he was very polite to them and very nice, and he didn't really preach to them. He just wanted to know what they're teaching here in this country. And so then as they left, he had me give them a little brochure. There was a drawing of the Universal Form that I had made, and it was a little brochure describing Chant Hare Krishna. It had a picture of Lord Vishnu on the front with all the arms. And so he asked me to give them a copy of this as a gift, because I think they gave him some literature too. And then the next morning, whenever he went out on his walk, he saw that it was on the street, had been run over by a car. And he was really disturbed, and he said, oh, we should not give out such freely. He was distressed that the Lord's picture had been run over by the car. Well, no, it was later that day he was talking about how the Western boys and girls, oftentimes, they go to the other side. The problem is they go to the other side. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, what do you mean by the other side? You mean back the way they were before? And he said, yes. Because he was talking about how some sannyasis had left and become as, the tendency when devotees stop doing devotional service is they go to the lifestyle that they were living before they were a devotee. So he's saying they go as they were before. And I said, so you mean they go back like they were? And he said, yes. Therefore, many of them will have to take birth in India to finish their Krishna consciousness. What? And before going back to Hawaii, he began to speak about compassion. And when he would speak about something, you would experience it. It was like a transmission or something. And he began to speak about compassion, and he began to speak about how his eyes were closed and there were tears running down his cheeks. And he was saying, people are suffering in this world. He was expressing divine compassion for all the souls suffering in this world without Krishna consciousness. And he was saying, please go and teach them. Tell them about Krishna. Tell them, give them this knowledge, because they are suffering. They don't know they're suffering, but they are suffering. And he became in such a mood of compassion that tears were coming down his cheeks, and he was just showing how much love that he had for all the jivas in this world who don't know about Krishna.
In the couple of months before we met Srila Prabhupada, when Gary and I were living in Haight-Ashbury area, there were some flyers that were distributed. And they said things like, the Swami is coming to town, chant and be high forever, this sort of thing. I'm sure you've heard of them. And I remember Gary looking at one of these flyers that said, the Swami is coming to town, and him saying, well, when this Swami comes to town, we'll go see him and we'll do whatever he says to do. It's just, the whole thing was such a mystical, incredible experience, in that we were actually very well situated at miles away, 1,500 miles away in Texas, and we were drawn there. And I think this is true of many other people. So then we went to Frederick Street and found out about when the classes were and so forth. Made an appointment with Srila Prabhupada, and Mukunda Das, who later became Mukunda Goswami, arranged for us to visit Srila Prabhupada. So in our first meeting with him, private meeting with him, he took us up to his apartment. I remember waiting pensively to meet Srila Prabhupada. He brought us in, and Srila Prabhupada was sitting in, those little bay windows that they have in San Francisco, these apartments with bay windows. He was sitting in sunlight, looking very effulgent and very peaceful. And he sat in a chair, and there was another chair opposite. I think he sat in the lounge chair, and I sat in the rocking chair, or vice versa. I can't remember that one point, but we were opposite one another. And Gaurasundar, Gary, sat on the floor. And he began to ask us questions all about our lives, what we were doing, who we were, where we had come from. He was very personally interested in us. And I mean, he was very personally interested in each of his disciples, each of his students. But he asked us, if we were students, what we were studying. We told him we had been studying art and that we were artists. He asked about our parents, our family, so many things. In the course of the conversation, I told him that I had studied art in Europe and that I had traveled all over Europe and studied in various places. And he was quite surprised. He raised his eyes and said, "Oh, you have traveled so much?" Because I was very young. I looked like I was 16. I was actually 19 or 20. And I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada. Yes." He wasn't called Prabhupada yet. "Yes, but none of it has made me happy." And he smiled and said, that is required. To actually be disgusted with material life. At the time of the initiation, there were no saris, there were no social customs, none of these things. And I had been an art student, and art students wear jeans. So I was actually initiated in blue jeans. Well, actually, they were beige jeans with paint stains on them. It didn't seem to matter to Srila Prabhupada, but that was what our life was like at that time. When I tell people I was initiated in jeans, they're just amazed. But most of us, we didn't know what saris were yet. So during my initiation, I remember watching the ceremony and seeing him putting the flower, putting the colored dyes, and putting making the fire, building the fire. And I remember thinking, what is this? What is the depth of the meaning of this? What is really going on? In other words, I didn't have the kind of, I didn't have the background. I mean, there was no Bhagavad Gita printed yet, for one thing. The only thing we had were Prabhupada's 3 books. So we did read those right away. And the first job that he gave us was painting a great big 4-foot by 4-foot Radha Krishna painting. But during my initiation, I had some misgivings. So then after the initiation, I went to see Srila Prabhupada, and I went upstairs to visit him. And I told him that I didn't feel liberated. I thought that when I got initiation, by golly, it was going to be nirvana immediately. I was going to be liberated. And he was very patient with me. He said, "Yes, just see the fan over here." There was a fan sitting in the corner. "If I unplug it, it may spin a few more times, but because it has been unplugged, it will stop eventually." So it's like that. Your material life, although it may not cease immediately, because it has been unplugged, it will spin a few more times. But just do the process as I told you. So he explained it very beautifully, very, very gently. Srila Prabhupada immediately engaged us as artists. He knew that we were art students before, so his very first project was to have me paint a great big 4-foot by 4-foot painting of Radha Krishna from the cover of his Srimad Bhāgavatam. Then he had me paint a great big 4-foot by 3-foot painting of him sitting on the Vyasasana with a painting of Lord Chaitanya dancing in Sankirtan party hanging behind him in the picture that I painted, and specifically with Lord Chaitanya's foot touching his head. So those are the paintings that he started us on. And what I found so significant in this is that Srila Prabhupada engaged people in the work for which they had a natural propensity. He always found, and this gave the person a taste for devotional service because they already had that inclination. Another very significant thing happened in Boston. Swamiji became Srila Prabhupada. The way this happened was that Gorsinder was studying Hindi, and he was studying Sanskrit, and he was studying various forms of address, and Ji is an affectionate friendship form of address, and this is all very new to us. So I was sitting in Srila Prabhupada's room and taking dictation, as I often did, and Gorsinder was at the doorway, and he said, Swamiji, is it okay if I call Govinda Dasi Govinda Ji? And Swamiji said, no, Ji is a very third-class form of address. It should not. And so I said, well, then why are we calling you Swamiji if it's a third-class form of address? And he said, not very important. I said, no, it is very important. We want to know what is the best thing we can call you. And Swamiji said, well, you could call me Gurudev or Guru Maharaj or Srila Prabhupada. And I said, well, which one is the best of those three? If you give me three, I don't know which one. So you pick the best one that you want to be called. And Swamiji said, Srila Prabhupada is nice. I said, okay, from today you will be called Srila Prabhupada. And so I told all the devotees, and everyone started calling him Srila Prabhupada from that day. He was no longer Swamiji. We were at New Jersey in the spring of 1968, after Srila Prabhupada's stroke. We were living there for 3 weeks. It was at that time that Gorsinder received his call to the draft. So he had to have an appointment in New York and it was a very great likelihood that he would be drafted into the army. Naturally, we were in a lot of anxiety about this because Gorsinder didn't want to fight a war that he didn't believe in, and that Srila Prabhupada also did not support. So the day came for Gorsinder to go for his draft appointment in New York, and he was in anxiety, and as he bowed down to leave, Swamiji said to him, don't worry, Krishna will protect you. He will take care of everything. So he was gone the whole day by train to New York, and I know during the day Srila Prabhupada mentioned him several times, so he was thinking of him. Then in the evening, we heard him coming up the stairs, and he had a big smile on his face. He was very happy. And so as soon as he came in, Swamiji called him to his room. What happened? And he explained that he had a silken cord with the Lord Jagannath on his neck, a murti of Lord Jagannath about 3 inches high, and he also had his big red chanting beads, and the doctors there had never seen such odd things. So they had given him a 3Y based on not being a psychiatrically competent for the army. And so Srila Prabhupada said, yes, just see, Krishna will protect. If we are sincere, he will make all arrangements. He will protect us. And you have chosen Krishna's service, not the army service, so Krishna has arranged everything perfectly. And this was at the time when he was visiting Hawaii. And at that time, there were several disciples who were very, by nature, very intelligent and charismatic, and had misled some of the more simple folk, simple-minded devotees. And I was in a lot of anxiety about it because I felt extremely protective of the devotees, having been the first devotee in Hawaii. They were like my children, sort of. So I was very protective, and I was very anxious about it. So I was explaining to Prabhupada how such and such, these people are, they're misleading him in this way and in that way, and changing the philosophy and so forth. And Prabhupada very calmly looked at me and said, the mouse respects the cat, and the cat respects the dog respects the wolf, and the wolf respects the tiger. But we see they are all animals. In other words, from his perspective, all of us, all of these people that he's having to deal with on this planet are really on the level of animals. And if we realize that, we won't get too puffed up. If we realize that we're really coming from very, very low-grade backgrounds, he's coming from Krishna Loka. There's no chance of our getting so puffed up that we think that we can outguess him, edit him, change his ideas about things, think we could do better. It's impossible. We can't. He can outguess. I mean, I saw so many instances of this. Unfortunately, one very close to home instance was my own husband, who I loved very much, Gorsundar. He was brilliant. He was very educated. He was studying Sanskrit and Bengali, and he did the transliteration for Chaitanya Charitamrita, the first part of it. And he was a very nice devotee. He used to take Prabhupada on walks every day, and he did the massage every day. I give him all credit for all the wonderful service that he did. But later on he left, and Prabhupada made the comment to me, even though he knew I was quite attached, many times he said, Gorsundar is suffering from too much intelligence. He has the disease of being too intelligent. He thinks he knows more than his guru. And this was Gorsundar's flaw. He was very, very brilliant in every respect. But as soon as a person thinks they know more than their guru, then the fall down begins. One incident took place with me and Srila Prabhupada. And this was in Los Angeles in September of 1968. We were going to record the record album, the Govinda record album. And so early in the morning, he wanted to use his spiritual master's preface to Brahma Samhita, the materialistic demeanor cannot stretch to the transcendental. You know the one I'm talking about. Anyway, he wanted to use that, so he asked me to type it up. I think he wrote it out or something, and asked me to. So I typed it up, typewriter. You know, we use typewriters and others. And he read it to me a couple of times to practice, because we were going to the recording studio around 9 in the morning, 9 or 10, fairly early, and we were going to record this this talk and the Govinda record. I think it's called the Govinda record, right? You know the one I mean. So he read it to me, and I listened very carefully. He would read things to me and see how does this sound, you know, just because I knew English, you know, fairly well. And so he read it to me, and there was one word that he pronounced differently from what is customarily pronounced in the English language. That word is analogously. And so I never corrected Srila Prabhupada before. In fact, I loved it that he called watermelons water lemons. When he would ask me for water lemon, I never said, oh, Prabhupada, that's called watermelon. And when he called for some antelope, I never told him that's called cantaloupe. I was fine with that. I had a very motherly relationship with Prabhupada. I thought he was just whatever he said was wonderful. You know, if the sky was striped pink, green, and orange, fine. But because I was thinking that other people are going to hear this, and this is for all posterity, and they may not understand his accent, and he's pronouncing this word analogously, and they may not understand what that means. So I had very good intentions. My intentions were very innocent. I was not on any kind of ego trip. I was simply thinking, oh, you want your guru to become the best foot forward type thing, you know. So I said, Srila Prabhupada, I think that word is pronounced analogously. He looked at me and said, you pronounce it your way, and I'll pronounce it my way. We were in Hawaii at the Honolulu temple, and I was making deities. And he had spent a great deal of time explaining how he wanted the Gornitai deities made, and there was a devotee sculptor there, one of his disciples who was a sculptor. And he gave us elaborate instructions of what to do, and after all of his elaborate instructions, the sculptor devotee asked, my wife would like to make silk, but in order to make silk you have to kill the silkworms. So is this okay? And so Srila Prabhupada, I don't actually recall what he said about the silk, but after this devotee left, he expressed that he was annoyed because that he was giving one instruction, and next, instead, there was a talk of making silk, and he said, these Western disciples, they are so creative. Next, they will be asking me if they can kill cows to make mridungas. Srila Prabhupada gave classes each morning in the Frederick Street Temple and would always ask for questions at the end of the class. But he wanted questions that were relevant. One morning, I wanted to hear the story of Lord Chaitanya falling in the water. It wasn't really relevant to the class, so I was kind of shy about asking it. But anyway, I raised my hand and I asked, I said, well, this isn't really relevant, but could you please tell the story about Lord Chaitanya falling into the water? And Prabhupada went into ecstasy. I didn't know what was going on. He became totally quiet for about 5 minutes, and I was like, oh gosh, what have I done wrong now? I was really worried. And then he came out and he said, yes. And he told the story of Lord Chaitanya falling in the water. And afterwards, all the devotees were saying, didn't you see there were tears running down his face? Tears were coming down, and he was completely in ecstasy. And I marveled on that, and I began to see that here he's in the Western world, and Western children, we were just like children to him, were asking him about Lord Chaitanya, and it gave him great pleasure. It gave him great joy. One very significant thing happened in Boston in 1968. We had a new Back to Godhead, and it had it was in May, because we were in Boston in May of '68. This particular Back to Godhead had an ad on the back cover. It looked very slick, at least graphics for those days, and it had a picture of Prabhupada, black and white, and said, "This man changed the world." It looked pretty slick. Prabhupada called me in his room and handed it to me and said, "Look at this." And I was like, okay, I'm looking at it. What's wrong with it? And he said, this is very bad. This is very serious. The spiritual master should never be referred to as a man. This is the beginning of fall down. This consciousness to view the spiritual master as an ordinary man, as a man, to even call him a man, this is the beginning of fall down. Call Rai Rama. Rai Rama was responsible, I think, Rai Rama, Jayadvaita, there were several in Boston at that time. Rai Rama was in charge, I believe. I'm not really sure of the person responsible for it, but I think it was Rai Rama. In any case, that's not the issue. The issue is that Prabhupada was very, very seriously affected by this. And his explanation was that one should never, ever refer to or consider the spiritual master on the level of a man. When we were in Montreal, Srila Prabhupada had asked the London Yatra to go to London and open a temple. That consisted of Malati and her husband Shamsundar, and Jamuna and Guru Das, and Mukunda and Janaki. So they flew from San Francisco to Montreal to see Srila Prabhupada before going to London. Malati had just had a baby, Saraswati. And of course they came to see Srila Prabhupada, and Malati's baby was on her hip. She was always dancing with the baby. I was always amazed, legs and arms were kind of flopping. The baby was on her hip when she would be dancing in kirtan. And when they came to see Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada took the baby, little baby Saraswati, held her up over his head and said, "So, do you remember me? I'm your old friend." And of course, Srila Prabhupada indicated on many occasions that these children are so special. These children are children that have been brought in to spread Lord Chaitanya's movement, that have come from higher places, demigod lokas or higher dimensions, or who knows where they came from, but they've been brought in by Srila Prabhupada's request to spread Lord Chaitanya's mission. And I think one of the most important things that we can do in our lives is to let the children know this, how much Srila Prabhupada counted on them, how much he cared about them, and how important they are to him. Whatever has happened is unfortunate, but this is a very important part. He loved the children very, very much. He taught them, he wanted to teach them everything. When I was in Dallas, many years later, he was there for several days in Dallas. He gave lectures. Dayananda was the headmaster at the time. He gave lectures. Every lecture was about teaching them with love, disciplining them only with love. If you love them, they will respond. They will want to do things properly. Not with a heavy hand, but with love. Those lectures, I'm sure, we recorded and are available. While living with Srila Prabhupada in Los Angeles in 1968, we did the drawing for the Bhagavad Gita, and we also did the drawings for teachings of Lord Chaitanya. The drawings for teachings of Lord Chaitanya, they took quite a while. There were 5 of them. Srila Prabhupada supervised every aspect of them. There was a picture of the Nawab coming to visit the Goswamis, the Rupa and Sanatan. There was a picture of Jagannath with Lord Chaitanya in the Jagannath temple. At that time, I had no idea what the inside of Jagannath temple looked like. Srila Prabhupada described how it was dark, and the pujari is sitting up on the altar, and he's handing down garlands. He described the interior. So I did the painting, or the drawing, according to Srila Prabhupada's descriptions. Later, when those 5 drawings were removed from the book, Srila Prabhupada was totally disgusted. He said, "Why they have removed these drawings from this book? Why they have removed them?" And he had personally overseen them. And so far as the other illustrations, the illustrations to the Krishna book, one of his statements about that, when he saw that they had been removed, was, "Why they have removed these paintings? Those paintings, those early paintings were full of bhakti. They were full of bhakti. The mood was very special, even though the technical quality of the paintings might not have been perfect." So in Montreal, it was Srila Prabhupada's birthday, and I decided to make a cake for him and celebrate it like Westerners do. So I baked a nice 2-layer cake, frosted it, and put some candles on it, not 72, but a bunch of candles, and lit them all, and then brought it into his room. And as I brought it into his room, his eyes were big, and he said, "Oh," he was very surprised to see me carrying a flaming cake. So I put it on the altar and offered it, and then I brought it over to him and said, "Srila Prabhupada, this is how we celebrate birthdays in America, and so if you blow out all the candles, you can make a wish." And so he blew out all the candles, but you don't have to tell anybody what you wish for. And so he blew out all the candles, and then I said, "Well, you don't have to tell anybody." He says, "Well, I wish only for Krishna's service." only for Krishna service. And then, of course, we enjoyed the cake, Western style.
Hey, Hare Krishna. How did you find it? Very nice, isn't it? So now we know how Swamiji became Prabhupada. The wonderful devotees, Govinda Dasi, Mother Govinda Dasi, she's still now she's very upfront against anti-vaccination. So Prabhupada would not have taken vaccination. This is all a humble bogus formula by this elite of the world, all these things. Very nice, passionate, very beautiful, very, very beautiful. Okay, we got half an hour. What do you guys think? And any realizations you have from what you heard from two wonderful devotees today?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you very much for showing these wonderful, very nectarian, Srila Prabhupada memories. It's when you're watching them, you just wanted to watch more and more and more, and it transport you into that very time, and it's, when you hear it, it's like you are there with Srila Prabhupada. So yeah, this one memory Mataji shared about the instinct, when Srila Prabhupada was explaining. I think you shown us that before as well. So it's, yeah, when the sand crab was going, and it's nothing like instinct, like modern scientists they say. It's a Paramatma inside that guiding us. So that's very very good point, for because the modern science and modern people, they try to they don't want to accept the existence of Paramatma, and they just try to label those things into different theories, their own theories. So that is wonderful point, Prabhu. Yes, that's the one point I realized. Thank you.
Yeah. Now imagine this, Prabhupada, if Prabhupada had not, if Mataji would not have recollected this conversation, we would not have known this point. Is it not so?
Yes.
So this is the point to be understood. And they said, all these devotees, they said that Prabhupada were very ferocious in points, in challenging things. Prabhupada challenged every normal order. This is rascaldom, this is wrong. When it was wrong, So, and you'd call everybody rascal, you are rascal, this is wrong, that is wrong, because no hypocrisy, not allowed.
Yes.
So
There's so much clarity that Srila Prabhupada give the answer to every single question with so much confidence and clarity. It's no confusion at all. Yeah.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Jai.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Amarisho. Thank you for showing this. I have not read your post that what you are going to show today. When I opened up, okay. So you have shown this before to us in our early days of Krishna consciousness.
Yes.
And but our realizations are now, when we listen to them and we do preaching in our tutti-frutti way, whatever we know, here and there. And now we realize that what Prabhupada were actually doing and how we are touching so many lives. And we have discussed this before, that when he went to America, all those young people who were hippies came in contact with him. And they were no good for the society that time. And see what they have done. What they have done. Like just one example you gave, that Srila Prabhupada name we would have forgotten. And there's so many things they have done, and that they were not ordinary souls. And Prabhupada says to Saraswati Mataji, yeah, so that's Prabhupada. And one more thing which I come across all the time, that I'm not progressing, or Prabhuji, we have started chanting, but we are not progressing. So that nice example he gave about that fan. Okay, I've taken a switch off, it takes time. So please keep doing the process and eventually you will feel liberated. So there are a couple of things which came to my mind. Thank you, Prabhu.
Jai, Hare Krishna. That's right. Absolutely correct. We learn from this so nicely, so much. No doubt, all these hippies and all were there. They took big positions and they fell down very badly. They fell down. She also spoke about children being, so much, $400 million was spent. They lost a suit in ISKCON, against the children, and very badly. So many of them committed suicide and all. No doubt about it, But still, it's continuing, And today we saw our children in the program being put up, in front of everybody, and they recited the verses, and this will have an impact, Kids create a lot of impact, So you have to be very particular. Earlier, I used to make my son sit down and he would sing the verses and then I would say, I was waiting for the time where others would bring their children in and we could have them doing. So I tried something different today, and hopefully it'll continue, And we should do it in all the programs everywhere. Children are Vaikuntha children, devotees, kids, Wonderful. Wonderful. Jai. Okay. I think that looks like we'll come to the end of the program, Yeah. Okay, I was very this thing about even that Mataji's, Jahnava Mataji, that how she created a situation, of the painting. and how Prabhupada were upset. So she asked up to Bharadraj. Who's Bharadraj? I'm sitting here talking to me instead of me talking to somebody else. It was very nice. It was very, very inspiring. She coming and saying this. So there is one Prabhupada with books, as you study books, Prabhupada's books, as you study sincerely. Then there are Prabhupada's personal interviews, personal talks, which he has with interviewers and all that, That's what we study in question and answer sessions. And then there is interaction with Prabhupada's personal talks in morning walks. And then there are Prabhupada's talks in room conversations. All these are very different. He was the only person who said moon landing is bogus. It never happened. Imagine this. Today, people are called conspiracy theorists, right? Right? They are called conspiracy theorists. And he was then at the time first person. In fact, because he would say certain things, people who don't understand the disciples. So he stopped saying this. Because people won't understand. Other disciples left Prabhupada. And Prabhupada said, we never went to the moon. We went to some other planet. The moon is a higher planet. We never went to the moon. This is nonsense, bogus, completely. Now, after so many years, then they started to dispute it. Right? At the time, no one is disputing it. Because then Prabhupada saw in the newspaper, somebody showed, at the middle of the paper, at the end of the paper, they said, it costed so many billions of dollars of taxpayer money, which needs to be corrected. Prabhupada says, see, here it is. This is the thing. They don't want to tell you this point, They want the money, and for that, they didn't went all those things. He actually wrote a letter to, I don't know whom he wrote, to scientists or to the president. So you went to moon. Did you find any? Did you not find any higher living beings, beautiful gardens and all those things? What did you find? Only the rocks and all that. He actually wrote a letter to them. He was so convinced about it, Hare Krishna. Well. So, very difficult, very tough. So we should not be timid and naive on this. We've got a watered down version of Prabhupada. Today we saw how he was ferocious as well. Very angry, very upset, when things go wrong, so we correct it. But if we do not study properly, we just go in our own mood, to say, oh, nice, how this and how that, Okay. All right. We've got some time here. I can. If you guys are not responding, then I'll create something,
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji, for sharing these wonderful realizations. So, yeah, it was very nice to hear, Prabhuji, actually, Srila Prabhupada's direct disciples sharing their experiences with Srila Prabhupada. I think one of the things that really struck me where I think Jahnava Mataji shared that realization when Srila Prabhupada walked into the airport, where all his disciples started bowing down, and everybody was bowing down. It was it may be very unusual for them, all the reporters and press, representatives present there. So Srila Prabhupada realized that point, and he said that actually, spiritual master should be worshipped as God, as good as God. So that's how it should be. But if the spiritual master thinks that he's God, then he said he's dog. So it was really important point, Prabhuji, because he was at that position already, worshipped as God, but he actually put that point forward very prominently. So actually, in a way, he was teaching us, actually, if anybody thinks that he is God, then he's not real guru. So that actually, yeah, I think is a sign of a pure devotee. Even he is at that position, he's not attached to that position. So.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We showed with example. That's correct. Because even after Prabhupada's departure, so many of them became sannyasis and they started to imitate him. They would have their own Vyasasans. There would be 11 of them. They said, we are chosen by Prabhupada. So they would have 11 Vyasasans in every temple. Can you believe this? Prabhupada was 11 of them. They all had taken their names, Like Prabhupada is Srila Prabhupada, his Divangas. Somebody had taken Vishnupad, somebody had taken this and that. All his names were, elaborate names were given, all fell down. Somebody ran away with women, somebody had sex with children, with boys, all these things, all nonsense going on, Of course, they were new, but this is what the problem was. They couldn't understand this, what Prabhupada did, So one has to be very, very careful when Krishna is realm. Especially those who are preachers and those who are going to be preachers. As we're teaching everybody to be preachers, you want to become leader, you will face music in Krishna, from Krishna. I'll tell you what, the moment you slip here, there, you're gone. Innocent people listen to you, and if you speak anything wrong, you'll face the reaction. Karma will come badly. So as long, best is not to become leader, become servant and preach. No, we can preach, that's all right. But preach on behalf. The moment you try to feel, yeah, I'm great, it's me, it's all happening by me, you take the message and take all responsibility, So it's very, very tricky. In parents, being parents also is very tricky. If you teach something wrong, you depend on suffering, Yeah.
Yes, Prabhuji, yeah. And also another realization about where Mataji talked about slugs, slugs and ants. So that was very real. Even now, sometimes unknowingly, sometimes we do not feel comfortable with certain beings. But yeah, Srila Prabhupada, so merciful. We do not see that actually. It doesn't come naturally. We need to be taught to be merciful. So, but Srila Prabhupada was naturally, very compassionate towards the living beings. So, yeah, it's a hard point to actually, put that in practice. But yeah, because when we say insects and everything in our home, we become very uncomfortable. We do not feel We don't feel out of place sometimes. So, but they are also actually the Jivatmas, so part and parcel, just like us. So, yeah. It was very good realization, Srila.
Yeah, thank you. I remember many years ago when there was no Facebook, when there was YouTube was just beginning, or not even there. I think it was not there or hardly anything. There was no YouTube, no nothing. At that time, this particular realization of Govinda Mataji, we used to have emails. So there would be email chains. So somebody would write an email on this, and they would then send to their contact list. Would send to their contact list. Would send to their contact list. This is how it happens. Email chain. This was the original social media with emails. So in that, I had received this one incident that she was sitting beside Prabhupada, and the slug coming in, and she felt very uncomfortable. Prabhupada said, showing compassion, chant for this slug. And that's what I chanted. And that was then forwarded. I forwarded to my contact list. Many of them responded, "Oh, so nice, compassion, all those things." I remember it distinctly. This one particular thing, Yeah. And see. So we are so fortunate that we can make use of the technology, and you can do it all the time. Technology will change when you will preach, all of you youngsters. When you will preach about 20, 30, 40 years, we may be there, we will not be there. So you will use this technology, and then you will continue Prabhupada's teachings, Yeah. We have got big hopes from all of you. Yeah. Hare Krishna.
Yes, thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. I had a couple of realizations. I was just thinking, it's so right that we can read Srila Prabhupada's books and understand the message that Srila Prabhupada is trying to deliver, but there are certain things, how to behave, and the do's and don'ts, what not to do, that may not be written in the books. And we are getting that information through these wonderful devotees who are sharing their experiences with Srila Prabhupada. So for me, a couple of things really stood out. The first thing was that how Govinda, Dasi Mataji, she was sharing about being over-intelligent, about the Prabhuji. And she said that, I remember when we were children, I remember this term being used that, don't be too smart, but it can happen. Like if you consider yourself intelligent in the material world, or if you are associating with that group, especially, the students, and I can relate to this, because then you think you are a different class, and then you suddenly think that, you're so intelligent, but you have to then think, where I should use my intelligence, and how much intelligence I have, and where to stop. So there are certain rules and regulations which a spiritual master or with your senior devotees, we cannot act to be more smart. So I think that was a very, very good realization. And it can happen because this whole process is about being humble. And obviously when you, every person has certain qualities, and I think intelligence can make you proud many times. It's a very subtle thing. So I've experienced that personally in my life. So I'm talking about myself. So I feel that, it humbles you down. It makes, because it makes you think that, there is one thing which is intelligence, which we have in the material world, which can give us great marks and great degrees and everything. But then there's another intelligence, which is in the subtle form, which is applied for your day-to-day life, in how you deal with things, with people, how you deal with life. And that intelligence is more important, according to, our experience. So that was one instruction, I think, a take for myself personally. And the second one was also on the civil alliance, where Mataji said that she was very, very innocently trying to correct Srila Prabhupada in something, in the pronunciation. And it is very, I don't know how to say this, but it's very easy to fall into that. It's like a trap, I think, because I remember even when during our school times, and we used to have our maths lessons, and a few of us were very good at maths, so we used to be always the front benchers, and the teacher used to teach us something, and so the teacher is asking questions, and we were one step ahead and try to answer the questions. So it's like, you're completely in a different realm, and then everybody behind you, you don't even know who is behind you and what is happening. You're just totally into that, just being in there and answering the questions and just being on top of it, and what to expect and all that. And then sometimes you might get into the mode of correcting the teacher itself, because ultimately you're not the teacher, you're the student, and it's very, very easily you can get in the trap of, no, but it shouldn't be that, it should be this, because you don't know, you're still learning. So we have experienced that, and then this can happen in your personal life as well, not only with your studying. I can relate to this studying thing, because both the things are about intelligence, so that's my experience. So it's very easy to fall into that trap, and I think we should always think, even if we think that the person who is our spiritual master, always similar to us, we think is incorrect, we should take a step back and think whether we want to correct or not. That was another lesson I think we should learn. And I'll just give a small example on this. There was a practical thing that happened here. There was a senior sannyasi who had come, and he asked for water from one of his disciples. There was a big program, and he asked for water. And the disciple must have thought that, okay, why not I give juice, And so it was the intention was good. It's not a bad intention. I'll do something better. So he gave the juice, and the sannyasi said, no, I asked for water, So where we apply our intelligence and how we apply it is also very, very important. So yeah, I think it's one thread that can, you can have a whole class on this thread and a whole realization on this thread. And I think personally, I feel that, anybody who comes to Krishna consciousness, the first thing is they are really super intelligent. Otherwise, they cannot come to Krishna consciousness. So in that spirit, I think that we all need to just, try to acknowledge that, and acknowledge that with that, if we have that humbleness, then it's a nice combination. And it can take us to that right consciousness and right mindness. Hare Krishna.
Yes, thank you. we always want to be over smart, That's why we are in the material world. We think we are better than Krishna. That's why we wanted to become Krishna in the first place. Hare Krishna. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Guruji.
Yes, Hare Bol. No, please continue.
Yeah, I was just saying that there were so many points that I really, really enjoyed in the entire classes. One of the first points that were very impressionable to me was when Jahnava Mataji were talking about how she was, I'm not sure who she was speaking to, but she was saying that I can't be a pure devotee. And that's it. I'm going to leave ISKCON. I can't be a pure devotee. And the Prabhuji said that, yes, you can't be a pure devotee. You have no qualification. You can't be a pure devotee because Prabhupada is so great that he can make you into a pure devotee. He can make even you a pure devotee. And that I was thinking about that it's such a powerful point to think about, that really it's because the philosophy and everything that Prabhupada has given us is so perfect that's why we have this attraction towards Krishna consciousness, and everything that he has done for us. It's all credit to him that we're here and we're making whatever progress we're making. So as Mataji also said, that that humility is very important, to know that it's nothing to your credit, and it's really all Prabhupada's hard work and all that he has done. And there were also, along with that, there were a couple of things that were very interesting to me, about how Mataji said that she got initiated in jeans, that that she got initiated in blue jeans and black jeans. And I was thinking that that's how compassionate Prabhupada would be, that he was fully aware of the fact that they didn't know about saris and proper dressing, but he still initiated them, because that's just the kind of compassion he has. So it was a very good class. I really enjoyed it. Hare Krishna.
Yes, Hare Krishna. That's true. In preaching, he had to do a lot of compromising, But anyone in any stage, looking at Prabhupada, learning from Prabhupada, and every preacher has to compromise, has to adjust according to what people's needs are, things are. Slowly they will grow, Slowly they learn. We can see how a person comes first, and then their things change, and then even vocabulary changes. They are all pakka Prabhupada vocabulary, We use the word compassion, we use the word meditation, so many words we use, which we never used before, These are all ISKCON words, We speak in a particular way also, the hand going out and like this and all that, We are very different. We have become very different, slowly. Yeah. But for Prabhupada, if it was not for him, where would be all of us, Or where would I be? I don't know about you guys. But yeah. Hare Krishna. Okay, I'll wait for 10 more seconds if anyone wants to say anything.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you very much for for sharing this nice class today, devotee realization. I just wanted to say a small point. The Mataji asked Srila Prabhupada that can I pray for all the living entities? And Srila Prabhupada said, you pray to Krishna and Krishna will take care of all the living entities. And I was like, how foolish I am. Sometimes I just say, oh, somebody is sick or something, and then we just say, oh, I should pray for them. Who am I to pray for them? It's like, So Srila Prabhupada really said correctly that we just only need to pray to Krishna and Krishna will take care of everything. So this is the lesson for me from this realization, that we only need to pray to Krishna, and we are not such a great anyone that we can pray for anybody else. We need to pray to Krishna only, and then Krishna will take care of everything. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. When we're naive, we say, oh, she wanted to pray for the whole world. So do you know? Do you know all living entities? Do you know? And how can we pray for it? Like this, in emotion we go too much. The Krishna knows. Let him do his business. You mind your own business. That's no ego speaking, Anyway, oh my God. At so many levels we are egoistic. We don't even know. We feel very good. We feel we are very good. We are very nice. We are very compassionate. We are very non-egoistic. But we are full of egos. Do you know all living beings? He did not say it compassion. Prabhupada did not say it very nicely. Do you know all living beings? Then let Krishna knows. Let him do it. Let him do. Oh God, that's good. We're getting good lessons. The Prabhupada were very cutthroat to the point. That's it. Rather than compassion, yes, also compassion. At the same time, you would not be compromising on principles.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Before you close, I would like to share, like Purnamagna Mataji shared her realization that how actually she corrected herself. Same point, which actually I have experienced and used it in my journey into Krishna consciousness, small journey, was that the mercy we get and the mercy we may lose. That Mataji, when she was painting, and Prabhupada says, why didn't you ring someone else? Why didn't you talk to me, to a spiritual master? And Prabhupada was very angry, very upset, and she got this feeling that I am going to lose mercy of Srila Prabhupada. So that feeling of missing out the mercy, what you are telling us, being upfront, being to the point, not mincing the word, actually this is mercy. And that mercy, so I always thought that if I don't do this and if I do this, I will lose connection. So do you want to lose the connection? Okay, control my ego. So that's mercy point. Actually, I like that, and I really applied it, and I'm trying to. So, and I'm sure these young devotees, I talk to them quite often, and they are here because they don't want to give up. I don't talk all good things to them, or you don't talk all the good things to them, but they have realized that if we don't come here, we miss out. And I do tell them that we will not give up on you. You can reject us, but we will not give up on you. That's called mercy. And that mercy that I applied when I early stage, okay, if I leave, Prabhupada doesn't lose anything. My Guru Maharaj doesn't lose. I miss out. That mercy, that losing that connection was so important. It's so important, even now. Hare Krishna.
Jai, very nice. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And hopefully all the devotees appreciate this, on this. Yeah. Yes, Hare Krishna, Sushi Mother.
There was quite
Yes.
elaborative points that I wanted to discuss, but a few major points that struck me was one is when Mataji told that Prabhupada she was an art student, so Prabhupada used the ability of everybody to its best to serve Krishna. That was so profound, that what we are good in, what our natural influence is, we Prabhupada tend to use it in the service of the Lord, and that's so amazing. That was profound. And one more thing that I wanted to add was listening to each one of the realization was that it's difficult to understand the mood of a pure devotee. Like, it's very difficult to grab what intention Prabhupada would have when he rejects something and he sometimes mercifully taking somebody else's naive thing very compassionately. It's so difficult to analyze for me as an individual that what he might have been thinking at that point, and rejecting somebody's painting and at the same time accepting somebody's birthday offering and blowing off a candle very compassionately and cherishing that. So it's quite difficult. And today, as my realization goes, I was contemplating on the fact that I really want to understand the mood of devotee first, but it's quite difficult. It's very difficult to understand the mood of devotee, of a pure devotee. What the pure devotee wants. We were discussing that in the previous Saturday class also with Avinash. So it's difficult to understand. But yeah.
Jai. Prabhupada accepted that poetry, of that other disciple, when a cowherd boy becoming a frog and playing with Krishna and all that. So this is very good. Print it, Yeah, that's right. We never know. In the 8th canto of Bhagavatam, there is mentioned, a devotee's heart nobody knows. His plans nobody knows. Especially if you are a preacher, if you preach honestly as a preacher, even your heart nobody knows. People will misunderstand you more than you understand. Be prepared to walk alone. This is a fact. This is a fact. And even the normal devotees also, what is in their heart, generally people do not know. Others who are in material world, they don't understand him or her. And this especially is true for preachers. So we are always looking for lions and tigers. They don't go in herds. Herds are only sheep and goats. They go in herd. Lion, tiger are always walking alone. But they control the herd, Yeah. You will not know this. In New Zealand and other countries also, where there are sheep farming and goat farming, there is a competition which happens every year, where they show each farmer would have a dog, and the dog has to manage this whole number of sheep and take them at a particular from one point to the next point. And he has, without barking, he cannot bark. He has to move limited spaces, and the sheep would see them, and the dog would move, and he would then have to bring them and take them into a particular direction and into a particular, enclosure. And there are awards for this. You see, and then the shepherd there may guide the dog with his whistle and all that slightly, without saying much. The dog moves. It's very beautiful. And the sheep are in plenty, hundreds of them. The dog moves from there. He stops. He looks there. So, yeah, we are not those sheep. Actually, in Hare Krishna, we can. We are not the sheep. But some of them may be sheep. Doesn't matter. All good. We'll make use of everybody. But yes, the heart of a devotee nobody knows. It's very hard to understand. So don't judge a devotee. It's a good realization. You should not judge. Okay. I'll wait for 10 more seconds. All right. Hare Krishna. So with this, we come to the conclusion of today's program. It was a wonderful program. Right. Okay. Now, who's going to sing Maharaj? Maharaj, please hear us. Whose turn is it now? Is it Navina's turn? Is it Subhadra's turn? Whose turn is it? It's Navina's turn. Sure? Huh? Okay. All right. Wonderful. Let's go. Wonderful. Okay. Now you'll now do this recording. I'll mute myself and sing very nicely. Okay, Navina? 1, 2, 3, start.
Maharaj, please hear us. We have learned some real good stuff. Maharaj, we have learned one thing. And today for you we will sing. If our room is clean, then our mind is clean. If our mind is clean, we can do anything. If our room is dirty, then so are we. And if we are dirty, we're not happy. Wasting time is the greatest crime. Because wasted time means a wasted mind. So best use your time when you're in your prime. And your whole life will be sublime. If your wealth is gone, then there's nothing wrong. But if your health is gone, that's a different song. But if your character dies, then the world will cry. Only saintly behavior lets humanity thrive. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We must always remember Krishna and never forget him too. But how are we to practice this with so many things to do?
How are we to practice this with so many things to do?
That is the greatest question.
That is the greatest question.
And here is the greatest clue.
Here is the greatest clue.
You must learn to work so nicely that Krishna remembers you.
You must learn to work so nicely that Krishna.
So listen very closely
Listen very closely.
and make your thinking sharp.
Thinking sharp.
Let's learn how we can live and work so Krishna won't depart.
Let's learn how we can live and work so Krishna won't depart.
If something's due tomorrow,
Something to tomorrow.
finish it today.
Finish it today.
And whatever's due today,
And whatever's due today,
do it now, don't delay.
do it now, don't delay.
Your friends might be lazy
Your friends might be lazy
or doing bad things.
or doing bad things.
But if you think again,
But you think again,
don't
Not if.
follow them.
Not
don't
if. Not if.
follow them.
Say again. But if you think, don't say if you think again. But you think again.
But
Don't
you
follow
think
them.
again,
Yes. No if.
don't follow them. Whatever work we're given,
We work what we do,
we do our very best.
we do our very best.
We only live with what we need and give Krishna the rest.
We only what we need and give Krishna the rest.
This is how to live, to work and to play. If you learn to live this way, we'll see Krishna every day.
This is how to live, to work and to play. If you want to live this way, this is Krishna every day.
And when that time is up, he'll take us off above. We'll sing and dance with him with our hearts full of love.
When our time is up, sing and dance with him with our heart full of love.
So chant Krishna's name, his glory and his fame. It's the only way this world will ever become sane.
Chant Krishna's name, his glory and his fame. It's the only way this world will ever become sane.
Now please ask this greatest question and find this greatest clue.
Find this greatest clue.
You can only remember Krishna if Krishna remembers you. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Holy Srila Mahavishnu Goswami Maharaj, Srila Gurudev ki Jai. Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Shri Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki Jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Chandra Prem Anande Hari Hari Bol. Krishna Padaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Srimati Mahavishnu Goswami Namine. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vistaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurmani Puchayane. Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashatresh. Hare Krishna. So with this we conclude today's program. Krishna willing, we will see you next week. Same place, same time. Till then, chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Ram. Hare Ram. Ram Ram. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare.